And we have a segment that we've been doing for quite a while called Daily Distractions, and it's kind of taken on multiple meanings within the show. It was originally meant to sort of lampoon or give our sort of take on some of the sort of strange spin that the media has on certain stories, but with the advent of COVID-19 and also with the current unrest that's going on, it's kind of taken on a different meaning. And sometimes we just want to kind of distract you for a little bit and take you away to a story that's maybe a little bit more positive, a little bit more zany, those kinds of things. So today, I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about SpaceX. And of course, what everybody has been talking about regarding SpaceX is the historic launch of the latest spacecraft to the International Space Station. But there's another story with SpaceX, and this is from CNBC, and the headline reads, Elon Musk tells SpaceX employees that its Starship rocket is the top priority now. It's kind of interesting because the mission to the International Space Station hasn't been completed yet. In other words, although the astronauts have gone up to the space station, they haven't come back down. So you can't call it a successful mission quite yet. Those astronauts still have to safely return to the Earth. And yet, Elon Musk is telling his employees that Starship is actually the new priority of SpaceX at this moment, which I thought was really, really interesting. And I'm not sure if you know much about the Starship program, Pete. Have you heard much about it?
I've read a little bit about it, that the ultimate goal is to get to Mars, that they're planning their first launch for 2022 and to get people, I think their goal is to get people to Mars, or to at least launch people towards Mars by 2024. That seems extremely ambitious. Is that what you've heard?
Yes. And so the key way that the top takeaways of this particular article say SpaceX is about a week past launching astronauts for the first time, but CEO Elon Musk wants employees to focus on developing the company's next generation rocket. The company's Starship rocket aims to be fully reusable and launch as many as 100 people at a time on missions to the moon and Mars. It says, but the Starship development program has suffered several dramatic setbacks, and Musk in the email declared, quote, the top SpaceX priority, which again, it's kind of interesting. Now, there is a caveat in this article that Elon Musk said, hey, we still got to get these astronauts back home that are on the International Space Station. That is in this article as well. But it is interesting because, there's an old saying, right? Don't count your chickens before they hatch, which, and this is kind of a perfect case of that because, again, the American astronauts, the NASA astronauts that are on the International Space Station, they haven't come back yet. We had a great successful launch. They successfully docked with the International Space Station. They're on the International Space Station right now, but they have not returned. But Elon Musk is pushing for basically another project. This is the prototype. This is the mock-up for Starship. Gosh, it really looks like classic Buck Rogers, doesn't it, Pete? I mean, just 100%, doesn't it?
Yeah, I thought that too. It looked like very much like a 1950s idea of what a spaceship would look like, which is so cool. Now, one of the components, though, you said, okay, they docked, they're on the space station. Now, one of the components of I guess it was the Dragon rocket, landed vertically already.
Yes, that's so the Dragon. It's the Dragon 9, right? It's called the Dragon 9 because it has 9 engines. And that is a partially reusable rocket. So the main booster, the largest booster part of it actually does come back to the Earth, and it lands like those old Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers serials or old Twilight Zone episodes. It lands, on the ground, vertically using the booster rocket to slow its descent. And again, it's very classic Buck Rogers, very much like classic Flash Gordon. And Starship aims to be 100% reusable so that the entire module can land and I assume lift off again, that kind of a thing, because you would kind of have that kind of a need in any kind of mass colonization project. I mean, we're talking about 100 passengers potentially at a time. That's the capability that they're looking at with this particular project. It really does sound like science fiction, but with what Elon Musk has actually accomplished, you wonder, is this really possible? Is this really going to happen? Are they really going to be able to do this?
Now, my question, if they're going to go to Mars, and you said it could carry 100 people, does that mean that this spaceship will also come back from Mars? Or I can't imagine they're planning to just colonize Mars.
Well, they are planning to colonize Mars. Elon Musk has actually been on record numerous times saying that he believes that humanity needs to be a multi-planet species, that we shouldn't be confined to one planet. He, like a lot of people, including myself, believe strongly that the possibility of humanity being wiped out by an asteroid is a real threat. It's a real possibility. We don't know how soon something like that could happen, but that's kind of the push behind people who think that way, is that that's why we need to have colonies on other planets, because the possibility of our own planet being devastated or wiped out by an asteroid, it's a real possibility. That it's something that could happen.
Okay, but we're talking in 2024. That would be the first launch. So you're telling me that the first launch, we're basically re-experiencing Jamestown. This is like Captain John Smith going to Jamestown the first time anybody goes. I mean, Christopher Columbus was 1492. It took a long time for the Spanish and then the English to get, to make permanent colonies in the New World. But you think that the very first voyage, they're going to try to colonize, put people on Mars, and it's going to be like Matt Damon and the Martian. They're going to start farming potatoes there on Mars.
No, I don't believe that's the plan. I think that the plan initially is to go to the moon and look at the possibility of colonizing the moon. And then I think the first mission to Mars, of course, would be more of an exploratory mission. It wouldn't be 100 colonists that plan to stay there. It would be more of an exploratory mission where, yes, indeed, they plan to come back. But the ultimate plan, I think, is to stay. And they would probably use the ship itself as a habitat. So you could potentially see sort of a one-way mission in the future, not necessarily the near future, but in the not so distant future, if this works. Now that they haven't got Starship to work yet, they've had a prototype that they've used called Starhopper that's listed here. They did a flight test in August, fairly recently, with Starhopper, but they haven't tested this massive behemoth of a ship yet. That hasn't happened. So that's still something for the future. It's highly ambitious, and again, I just think it's interesting because the NASA astronauts from the space station haven't come back yet, and yet, here we are. We're talking about a brand new ship, much larger, much larger scale, and he's already talking about doing it.
Wow.